Hi everyone, this is Jim. I played an interesting game at my local chess club last night. I thought I would share it with you guys. This was the second round of an open tournament, so everybody in the club was playing in one big section. There are over 40 players in the club, so pretty good turnout for this tournament. And a large range of rating classes in the tournament. So in my first round I was paired up against a lower rated player and I won. And then in the second round I paired up against a higher rated player. So my opponent, his rating for this tournament is 2038 and my rating is 1850. And well, if you've been following along with my rating saga, you may wonder how I got there. From last year I was at 1933. That was my new all-time high. And the answer is, well, I played in 4 tournaments since then and I lost about 20 points in each tournament. So that's how you can lose 80 rating points in about 5 months. Because it was October of last year I hit 1933. Anyway, 1850 is a pretty typical rating for me, so I'm not particularly underrated or overrated at this point. So there's a 200-point rating gap between me and my opponent. But, well, we've played each other many times. In the 13 games we've played previously, I have a record of 3 wins, 7 losses, and 3 draws. So he has the advantage, but he's not invulnerable, so there's always chances. Anyway, he has the white pieces and starts off with d4. I go knight f6, I go c4, I go e6, and we've played this way before, and he, as far as I can tell, he always allows the Nimzo-Indian, and I'm always happy to play the Nimzo-Indian as black, so I think we're both okay with this opening. He goes queen c2, and now I go c5. You can castle here, but white has this unusual response, e4, and this can be is kind of a tricky line. If you play d5, white continues with e5, you can play knight to e4, and there's all kinds of weird tactics there. And it's okay for black, but there's a lot to remember in those lines, so I don't play that way anymore. In fact, one of my games in this line was against the same player, so that was where I learned not to play that, I guess. So now I play a pawn move here. You can play other moves as well, like d5, but c5 is fine. And then he played e3. So this is the first move, which is kind of unusual. So far everything is pretty much standard. And the main line goes like this. Pawn takes, bishop takes. Oh no, not bishop takes. I always forget that. Yeah, I play bishop takes myself, but actually castles, because that pawn is not really going anywhere. Then a3, kicking the bishop, and then taking. This is kind of the normal way it's played. And knight f3 and b6. Just to allow this bishop to develop at b7 here, and it looks like a fine position for both sides. The bishop can get kicked back. It'll probably drop back to e7 there. In this position, white doesn't have to play a3. White can also go with knight f3 directly and g3, another way of playing it. But in this case, in this game, my opponent didn't take. He just played e3. And so we're in a rare section of the opening book, a kind of sideline, where it's only been seen a few times, but it's a perfectly normal move. There's nothing wrong with it. And I just continued playing standard moves here. I castled. He went bishop d3, and then I went with knight c6. He went knight e2, and I went with d6 here. So there's a typical kind of setup that I play, but actually the chess engine points out that d5 is a good move here, and probably better than what I played. We'll see that he had an opportunity in the opening to get an advantage, and we'll see what happened there. But anyway, I played d6. He went ahead and castled at this point, and we're just out of the book altogether. Let's see, instead of castling, no, it didn't give an alternative there, but that's a pretty normal move there. And here I went e5. This is a move that could have gotten me into trouble. If he had taken that pawn and I took back like this, this position is supposed to be pretty good for black. I mean for white. This is a good position for white. He can leave the bishop there and play with e4 and try and get a bind against this pawn, or he can develop the bishop to b2. So a couple different plans that white has from this point, and seems like well, maybe this bishop is going to waste some time getting kicked around. Probably if he pushes, I want to come back around this way rather than just exchanging. Anyway, that would have been best play. He took on c5, and I took back with the bishop, and then he went to a3. So he's preparing to kick my bishop back, and I stopped that with a5. And now he plays knight to g3, just continuing to develop his pieces. So all this is fine. I think white still has a slight edge, but no more than the usual opening edge. So we've survived the opening, both of us so far, just fine. Bishop e6, rook to d1, and knight to e7. Knight e7 maybe was a bit of a careless move, although I took my time here. It's it's important to not spend too much time in the opening, but also when you're in a in a situation which is not in your opening book, and we're well outside the opening book at this point, you do want to consider your moves carefully and make sure you're not walking into any big traps. And knight e7 does allow some kind of trap, so probably, well, it does allow some tactics that I wasn't fully aware of. So probably I should have taken a little more care at this point. Now it turns out knight e7 is still okay. Problems come later, but it was kind of setting up some problems. And I knew, I did think about this move for a while, like I said, because I noticed this potential problem along the d file. Maybe he's got some way of exploiting that, that potential pin there, or discovered attack. And there's also potential problems along this file. But I didn't want to play a slow move like a6 or h6 here, or g6. I did think about g6 a little bit, but really what I want to do is I want to get this knight over to the king side, because it doesn't have many good squares to go to on the queen side. And also I'm thinking of playing rook to c8. Okay, so anyway, I played knight e7, and he went knight c to e4, and this is this is when I realized that maybe that knight e7 move was played a little quickly, because there's a number of oh, I said knight c e4, but then I played the wrong knight. Yeah, he played knight c e4, like I said, not like I did. And so this is a bit of a tricky situation. So I'm going to illustrate some of the tactics here, and then pose a problem for you to see if you can find a solution. You can pause the video right here if you want to think about it without any hints, but let me play on a couple of variations and show you the problems. So taking is pretty normal response. So I think that's fine. Knight takes, and then here, if I do something simple like rook c8, just keep on developing, then he's got this move. He takes the bishop, I take back, and he takes here with check. He's just won a pawn, and I don't have any compensation, and my king side is a little bit messed up. So that is no good. Let's see, going back to this situation again. I take, he takes, see, I play a6 or h6 to avoid losing the pawn there. This is much worse. Now he takes, and if I take back, he's a whole piece up, but if I take back, he wins the queen. So that's bad. Let's see, what else? From this position, instead of playing, well, let's go back. This is the position I had to think about it all in. So knight takes, g6, so he can't take with check. Still, he takes here, and I take back, and then he takes here. It's a tempo on the queen. If I move the queen, then he gets this pawn with check, so he wins 2 pawns. And actually, the chess engine says the best play is to take the bishop and give up the queen. But this is clearly very good for white as well. He's up some pawns, and if you think, 2 rooks are about equal to a queen and the pawn, and then I have bishop and knight versus bishop and rook, so he's up the exchange plus a pawn or 2. So anyway, that's all of that is winning for white. So let's go back to the game. I had played knight to e7, and he played knight c to e4, and this was a position in the game when I had to come up with a solution. So if you want to, why don't you pause the video here and see if you can find the best way for black to play. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. You do start by taking the knight, and he takes back, And then the key move here is the second move, and there's only one right answer, and that is f5. And so this is nice. If he takes the knight or the bishop now, you can take back. And then if he does this discovered attack on your queen, you take back. And it's a counterattack on his queen. And he's actually down a piece in this position. I've got 2 pieces and he just has 1. And if we trade queens, I stay a piece up. So he can't play that way at all. So f5 actually solves all the problems. And that's why knight e7 was not a bad move after all. But it was maybe made a little bit too quickly. But as I said, you want to play somewhat quickly in the opening. It's easy to get lost in time if you want to think a long time about everything that could possibly go wrong. So you should play kind of the natural moves in the opening and save your time for when things get really tricky. Although you should always, keep your eye out for tactics like that. So maybe I was a bit careless there. Anyway, since he doesn't have any great moves here, he ended up playing b3. After the game, we ended up talking about this idea. He could have played bishop here. I don't have time to take the bishop. I would move my queen away from the rook, and then he could get his bishop on this square. I looked at this with the chess engine though, and it seems like this is also just fine for black. The chess engine would play like this. So we go ahead and take. Just drop the bishop back, and then say if he defends the pawn like this, if he pushes it forward, it gets isolated. So I don't think, even though it gains a tempo, I don't think it's a good idea. So chess engine plays e4, and then black can play rook a to d8 and hold the pawn back. And it seems like this is a fine position. Black has some counterplay, maybe with the idea of taking here and isolating that pawn, or just leaving this tension here on between f5 and e4. Anyway, those are that's also about even. So all of these lines, maybe there's some slight pull to white, but basically nothing has gone wrong here, and both sides are still in the game. So he played b3, and I went queen c7 now, getting away from these tactics. He went bishop b2, and I went rook a to d8. So I think all very normal moves here. He went queen c3, and this is the start of an unpleasant phase of the game. He did, because of that tactical exchange earlier, he did get rid of my dark squared bishop, and he took it with the knight, right? So it was there. And so now he's setting up the battery on the dark squares. He's kind of weakened me on the dark squares here, and it looks pretty tricky. I went knight g6. The chess engine actually says I should have played knight c6, and this is still in the range of about even. After knight g6, it's hard for me to tell the difference between those two moves. I was thinking the knight, I mean, I did consider both moves, and I was thinking knight might be useful over here on the king side, but apparently knight c6 is a little more solid. Maybe the knight's a bit exposed here with h-pawn pushes, although I had ideas for dealing with that too. Anyway, it's important that the knight has cleared the second rank, so even if the knight moves away and the pawn goes forward, it's not a mate there just yet, as long as the queen or rook or something is defending on g7. So anyway, I went knight g6, and he went on with g3. That limits my knight. The chess engine is giving bishop e2 as a move here, just getting away from that push and offering the trade. I just thought that was interesting, and it says that black should avoid the trade of rooks by playing bishop d7. So it's not clear to me in this position that white wants the rook trade or that black should avoid it, but that is the chess engine's impression, or at least that's what I get from looking at these moves. It seems it wants whites to trade rooks and black to keep the rooks on. Anyway, after knight g6, he went with g3, restricting my knight. I think that's a good move too. And I went rook d7. So my idea was just to double rooks and maybe get pressure against this bishop. I was thinking that the trading the rooks was not, I wasn't trying to trade rooks, but it's almost inevitable when you have only a single open file like this. So I was just preparing to trade, hopefully in an advantageous way. And well, he's doing the same thing. He lifted his rook. I doubled. He doubled. And then I just played b6. I didn't want my queen getting dragged away from the defense of these pawns. If you look at this situation, I've got a couple of loose pawns here defended by his queen. This one already has some pressure on it, and there's things about to happen in the center here, and I just didn't want to get fall prey to a sudden pawn loss in the middle of some complications. So, and I could not find an active plan here. So I think this is actually a good move. It's one of those what Chess Explained would call a strengthening move. You just try and improve your position a little bit if you can't find any real active plan here. And White has a plan, though. He goes with h4. And so now things have been forced to a crisis in the center. I didn't want to play h5. If I play h5 to block the pawn, he can drop his bishop back here, and I don't have any good way to defend that pawn. so and h5, when he plays h5, it's a threat because now this pawn is defended twice and attacked twice. But if the knight is pushed away, then he'll just pick up that pawn in the center. So I was pretty much forced to play e4 here. He dropped his rook back to e2. And yeah, I could not find anything better than trading the rook. So I went ahead and initiated the rook trade here. At least gains a tempo by dragging his queen off of this file, or this diagonal here. And it gives me a chance to reorganize my pieces. So there's another point in the game where you have to stop and think and look for a good move. I don't know if I found the best move here, but it's probably a good exercise if you want to figure out or think about how as black you would unwind in this position. Yeah, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to explain what I played, but there are many possibilities here. There's no one right answer in this case. I played the move knight f8. There's a couple of considerations I have here. I didn't want the queen penetrating on the d file here. So look at all these squares. They're currently under cover by the queen and the bishop. So I want to keep control of those squares, and I also want to not get mated. I don't want to push this pawn forward because that would actually open up a second square that he might come in on this diagonal. So I'm going to try and hold this pawn here and defend it with the queen. And I'm just reorganizing my pieces. My idea is to bring my queen over here and bring the knight around to the f6 square and block the diagonal that way. So that's kind of my plan here. He goes back to pressuring the diagonal. I play queen e7, have to stay in contact with that pawn. He goes queen to e5, and I had spotted this move, but I didn't see anything I could do about it. So I played knight d7. I just continue with my plan, and I didn't know what he was going to play here. He eventually decided just to play queen c3. But the chess engine does like this move, queen c7, and we were both thinking about this move. It's the only other square he can go to that's inside my camp, and it's a bit tricky. The chess engine would play like this. It would play h6, king g2, king h7, and then queen f4, which is not something I thought of, actually. So apparently he can hold the queen there, but he doesn't get a whole lot of mileage out of it. It ties my pieces up, but at some point he has to do something else, and probably he's going to try and push forward on the king side here. And it looks like that's a way of activating his bishop, and it looks like this is an advantage to white there. So that's best play. Anyway, he didn't see any great follow-up to queen c7. I didn't either, and he just dropped back to queen c3. So I continued. Well, I was a little worried about playing knight f6 right away here. What was I worried about? Coming back here? I forget what I was thinking at that point. Anyway, I didn't play knight f6 right away. I played queen to f8. He played h5. And now this is a problem. I can't let that pawn come to h6 and put pressure on g7 there, so I have to stop it. So this is kind of an ugly looking move. It creates this hole here. But I realized, after thinking about it for a while, that there's no great way for white to exploit that hole. In fact, after the game, he said he thought this move had been a mistake, because once I stop it here, it does create this hole in my position, but if he has no way to exploit it, then it's not really a weakness. Let's see. He went queen d2 here. I went queen e7, so we're just kind of doing this dance with the pieces. He went to queen d1. I'm trying to keep his queen from penetrating my camp. Let's see. I stepped forward with the king. Yeah, I guess this is my idea. I wanted to be able to put the knight here at a time when if he takes with the bishop, I can take back with the king and not have to take with the pawn. I was trying to avoid getting into a situation where I had a doubled pawn here on the f-file, so that's why I played those moves like queen f8 and things. So that I was worried about some line where he ended up taking that knight, and I had to take back with a pawn. Anyway, he went king g2 here, and finally I get a knight f6. So I'm breathing a little easier, but he still has this pressure. It's always a bit annoying. He went bishop e5, so he can put the bishop there as well as the queen, so he's trying a different organization of his pieces. And then I played the move. I think this was my biggest mistake of the game. I think everything has been very solid up to this point. I played queen d7. I was thinking at this point that the endgame is okay for me, but the chess engine does not agree. So first of all, let's see. The chess engine, let's give the line the chess engine recommended, because I think it's kind of interesting too. Shows some of the same concerns that I had. So king e8, this helps control the d file here, and the queen can't penetrate without the help of a rook if the king is guarding these squares. And then it recommends queen d6. And after the queen trade, king d7. So it thinks that's best play for both sides, and it rates this as about even. Notice that the king here is attacking the bishop. It's going to have to find a new home, and it can't go to this square attacking these pawns on the dark squares over here. And it seems like I should be able to hold a draw there. So that's best play. Queen d7 allows the queen trade, and he didn't go for it. But if he had taken, I was planning to take back with the knight, and then he could play bishop c7. And I was thinking this position I could probably hold as well. But, you know, this is different. His bishop has managed to penetrate into my camp, and my king cannot easily get over and attack that bishop, because the knight has to stay here defending the pawn, and his bishop is guarding these squares. So we've reached a kind of stalemate position over here, where, you know, or Zugzwang position, where there's no way that I can improve. At least it's not really Zugzwang because I have moves, but I can't really improve, and he can keep me tied down to the defense of this pawn. And then, well, after locking things up with a4, so I play bishop f7, the chess engine would go king h3 here, and this is the idea. So I mean, you know, it required a lot of calculation to get to this far, but the idea is to just start pushing these pawns forward and get something going over here on the king side, while my king is over here and my knight is tied up to the defense of these tied up to the defense of the b pawn. You know, possibly he could even get a bishop on this diagonal and threaten to trade it off, and then his bishop would rampage over here against these pawns. Although in a case like that, we would also be going for an opposite colored bishop endgame. So I might also still have drawing chances in that line. But anyway, that is best play there. So this so when I played queen d7 and offered that trade, that was a slight mistake. Anyway, that's what I played, and he should have taken and gone for the endgame. Instead, he went with queen c2, which is a good move, but it gives up the d file to me, and going for the endgame was the best chance that white had there. Let's see. So I went queen d8 here. I'm holding on to this pawn. He's about to apply more pressure to my knight, so I was anticipating this move. Oh, he didn't go to b2, sorry, he went to c3. And I wanted the queen to be here, so if bishop takes, queen takes, king takes, and I have a fine pawn structure, and no weaknesses for the endgame. So he went, yeah, I went queen e7 here, just staying on this diagonal. He went queen b2, so there's a little more dancing around. I go back to queen d8, and he finally pushes forward to b4. It's his only way to try and make progress. So I take, he takes, and then I went back here. It's his turn, and he takes again, trying to open up some lines. I thought for a long time about taking this pawn, and actually there's an obvious tactical reason why I shouldn't take it. So if you want to pause the video here, see if you could find the refutation to queen takes c5. Okay, if I had taken here, you know, I was thinking, well, maybe this gives me some play against this pawn, but I gave up on the idea because I realized that he could defend it easily, and I didn't have any great way to increase the pressure, and this pawn would be a weakness. But he has an immediate refutation with bishop to d4. So I spent more time thinking about that move than I should have. I mean, he can just grab the pawn now. So I take back with the pawn, and that was really the only move there. So I arrived with the right decision, although maybe not for the right reasons. And now he penetrates with, oh no, he played queen to c3 first. I go queen d8, so a little more dance with the queens. Back to b2, back to e7, then he went bishop c3. So he's got some ideas here. Let's see, I played knight e8. He went back here, I played knight f6. And actually, if you were keeping count, this is a threefold repetition. If I had noticed during the game, I could have claimed a draw right here. But I actually didn't notice that this was a draw. Anyway, he played on with queen b5. I went knight d7, hitting the bishop, defending the pawn, and he went bishop to f4. He wants to keep the bishop on this diagonal, and he's got a very dangerous idea here of bringing the queen down. I can't go there. Let's see, bringing the queen maybe to this square, and then bringing the bishop here, and then he's got two pieces attacking my pawn, and my queen is not in a position to defend it. So this is getting tricky now. He has managed to get some play here. I didn't have any great move at this point. I just went back with knight to f6. I mean, the pawn is not under pressure immediately. He can't play the bishop here. And my idea was maybe I could play knight to e8 to keep control of this e6 or d6 square, so the bishop can't come to d6. Anyway, he did go queen c6 here, and you know, I was thinking this is going to fall apart for me eventually if he keeps maneuvering. You know, he's probably going to find a way at some point to get the bishop in there and win that pawn. So I was looking around for something else, and I came up with a good answer here. So this is another point in the game where you have to kind of think a little bit, and if you want to pause the video and think about what you would play in this position, this would be a good exercise. Okay, I'm giving the answer away now. So there's two moves here, and there's probably more that are okay, but the top two choices of the chess engine have kind of a similar idea. One is queen a7, which if you've thought of this move, you know, it's defending over here, and it's also threatening to bring the queen in. But the way I played, which was another top choice of the chess engine, also leads to a draw, is queen d7. And I think this is a very clever move. The point is that if he takes, that really is a very easily drawn endgame, so that's no problem. Now that I don't have those other pawns over here, there's no more weaknesses for this dark squared bishop to attack. So even if he gets in the same position with the bishop on d6 attacking this pawn, I just defend the pawn with my knight, and everything is fine. So trading is no good. And when he takes the pawn, he also doesn't have any way to get the queen back to defend the back rank here. That's the basic problem. So this is forced. He takes the pawn, and then I come in here with queen d2. That was the idea of this move. And maybe the a2, a7 move had a similar idea with queen a2. I'm not sure. But well, this is the line I had calculated. And well, it's very important to note that if he plays bishop back, well, the bishop has no moves. I should point this out. The bishop can't go here, can't go here, can't go along here because it's all covered. And if it goes back, the only other move where it doesn't lose, or he doesn't lose a piece immediately, I have knight here. And this is just mating. This actually just wins on the spot, so he can't play that way at all. And the bishop has no moves, so the king has to defend it. And then I have the check. And he has no good square to move his king to other than, well, the only square to move the king to is back, or if he blocks with the bishop, once again he loses a piece. So after a couple of moves, bing, bing, bing. Oh, I don't think I played that one. Yeah, right here. We agreed to a draw at this point. So pretty interesting draw, I thought. Not all draws are boring. Hope you guys agree, and I will see you next time. Bye.